see up in the
So we're
corner
going to
that you
start off
like.
with the
Yeah.
chant all together.
Okay.
And this one's called Somebody's Hurting Our Brother. And so how we're going to do this one, if you haven't heard it before, let me just sing a little bit to you and I'll tell you which parts you're going to repeat. So I'm going to say, somebody's hurting our brother and it's gone on far too long. And it's gone on far too long. Yeah, it's gone on far too long. Somebody's hurting our brothers and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. So beautiful. You guys seem like you all know that one. So we're going to get started, and I just encourage everybody to, while we're doing these chants, to feel the lyrics to them. And so this one goes out to everybody in our nation, in our state, and in our world who is hurting right now. So may this song be a prayer for all those who are hurting. Start, so. Somebody's hurting our brother, and it's gone on far too long. Yeah, it's gone on far too long. Yeah, it's gone on far too long. Somebody's hurting our brothers, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore.
I'm here today as a leader from the faith community, from the Mennonite tradition. I'm Claire Hostetler, and I'm a chaplain working in healthcare. But I also attend the Cincinnati Mennonite Fellowship. We believe as Mennonites that peace and justice are one and the same, that you can't have one without the other, and that they are at the heart of the gospel of Jesus Christ and what his message is all about. The Greek word for salvation, or saved, is also the very same Greek word that is translated as healing. I don't know if you knew that. They can be interchangeable. Today we're talking about a vitally important resolution and promoting legislation that will bring healing to our community and our nation. The people at our church believe in looking at persons and their problems holistically, just like Jesus did, in ways that analyze things systemically. When we believe in working together as a community of faith and as salt and light in the larger community to develop strategies and working together to implement those strategies, that's when we have the best chance to bring real healing, not just to address individuals' needs, which is important, but also how to address the needs of our community and our nation as a whole. As a Mennonite chaplain and pastoral care provider, I infuse my work with theological underpinning that takes seriously, even literally, the central message of Jesus Christ, which is encapsulated in the Sermon on the Mount. It's all about loving your neighbor and defining what that means to address the challenges before us. Yesterday, the pastor of our church at Cincinnati Mennonite Fellowship included in his sermon some facts that were recently published about our situation right here in the Cincinnati community. And these represent just a small portion of significant community challenges that we have. For example, 52% of all children in Cincinnati ages 6 and under face poverty. 82% of African American students that attend Cincinnati public schools live in economically disadvantaged families. There are other statistics I could relate, but the basic message is this. This third Reconstruction resolution is centered around addressing poverty and low wages in our nation from the bottom up, and calls for a restructuring of society to benefit struggling populations and confront policies that practices that produce debt. In our church, we ask the question, what would Jesus do? The approach of the third Reconstruction is that you cannot solve one problem without working on all the others at the same time. A broad and deep national moral fusion movement rooted in the leadership of poor people to unite our country from the bottom up. We do this by lifting up those most directly affected by the interlocking pieces and giving them a voice. There are 140 million poor and low-wealth people in what is still, even in the midst of this pandemic that we're in, and trying to get out of, we're still the richest country in the world. The pandemic has only made that number larger. 250,000 people each year without a pandemic involved die from poverty and its intersecting issues. Just imagine how the pandemic now has affected those people already at risk. I want to say this about loving your neighbor. You can't love your neighbor while supporting or accepting systems that crash, exploit, and dehumanize them. You can't love your neighbor while accepting less for them and their family than you do for you or your own. I want to repeat that. You can't love your neighbor while supporting or accepting systems that crash and exploit and dehumanize people. I think most people hearing me today would probably know the parable of the prodigal son. I'd like to just share a modernized version of that. When the younger son arrived back home, asking for shelter and a leg up, he found his father waiting there with a big sign, and it said, #Prodigal Sons Matter. When the older brother, who was being all responsible and had stayed home and took care of his investments and done what he thought was all the right things, and he saw that sign, he got angry. and he wasn't going to attend the party. And he moved around, he got his own sign, and he had a one-man demonstration, and his sign said, hashtag, all sons matter. The father turned to his older son and said, dude, it's not about you right now. I think that's the message that we're trying to send today to our congressional representatives. Dude, it's not about you right now. It's about those who are caught up in the injustices of systemic racism, the denial of health care and ecological devastation, militarism, and the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism that seeks to blame the poor instead of addressing systems that cause poverty.
Yeah.
All of a sudden that came up.
So I'm going to ask that we talk really loud when we're talking because our sound system stopped working. So especially when you see the bus coming by, make sure if you're talking. So welcome everybody. My name is Mary Aguilera, and I'm here today with the Ohio Poor People's Campaign and National Call for Moral Revival. We've gathered today in Cincinnati and Cleveland to demand all our state's representatives embrace the third Reconstruction resolution, along with other 50 simultaneous actions across 30 states today. Together, we are saying in one loud voice, it's time to fully address poverty and low wages from the bottom up. When we have lawmakers like Senator McConnell and Senator Manchin who are blocking legislation for voting rights and living wages, we need to build a resolve for a third Reconstruction that centers the 140 million poor and low-income people in the country and the 3.8 million poor and low-income in Ohio with moral laws and legislation that meet our needs. The congressional resolution for a third Reconstruction is a nonpartisan resolution that is inspired by the pain and the organizing power of 140 million people living in poverty or low wages in this nation. It comes as a response to years of movement building and offers an omnibus vision to heal the nation from the interlocking injustices of systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, denial of health care, militarism, and the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism. The resolution is one part of our fusion organizing, which includes base building, faith outreach, cultural production, policy and communication, media work, and offers a way to prioritize the needs of 140 million in the legislative arena. It stands alongside our broader effort to realize a third Reconstruction by building the power of 140 million, changing the narrative around the interlocking injustices to restructure all of society. 2 weeks from today, on June 21st, 2021, we will gather online for a National Poor People's Assembly and to launch 365 days of fighting forward to June 2022. And we will hold a massive moral march on Washington. In person. Over the next year, we will continue to organize, mobilize, and build our power so we can realize a third Reconstruction to build this country from the bottom up. When you lift from the bottom, everybody rises.
All right.
Forward together!
Not one step back!
Forward together!
Not one step back!
Forward together!
Not one step back!
All right, next I'd like to introduce Andrew Sullivan.
Hi, I'm Nancy Sullivan. Some of you know me. I'm one of those citizen science nerds in my off days. So what I want to talk about with the environment is who pays and who benefits. As an Episcopalian, I can point to Charles Darwin, a probably ultimately at least agnostic Anglican clergyman. He was insatiably curious. He delved into the secrets of the air. We all know about the Galapagos finches. And also, he was an expert in barnacles. Who knew? Our water. And finally, his last publication before his death had to do with the lowly earthworm and what worms contributed to the soil under our feet. So in Darwin's day, most scientists were amateurs, driven by curiosity and not commerce. There were people like Mary Anning, an amazing paleontologist who unearthed fossils in the cliffs of Dorset. What does that have to tell us? What has changed? Many of today's scientists who are equipped with advanced degrees are busy developing, let's say, Roundup-ready crops, transgenic food, or something very near and dear to us here, ways to pass off hazardous waste as valuable commodities. Some of us are old enough to remember better living through chemistry, you know, and that's kind of come out of the in Rob Ballock's book and his incredible work around PFAS, PFAs. So it took several decades of hard legal slogging to prove that DuPont was poisoning all of us. Every living creature on planet Earth now has PFAs in our blood. But despite that, and DuPont knew it, they covered up. They used regulatory loopholes to silence people. But just 3 days ago, The Intercept reported that the Veterans Administration and an insurance company which specializes in firefighters have rejected claims despite evidence linking PFAS foam with diseases. There's even a pollution exclusion clause from the insurance policy. Is that right?
No.
All right. So they claim that you don't know if everybody has PFAS in our blood. How do you know that this firefighter got it from firefighting foam, or, by the way, by the uniforms that they're required to wear? Now let's talk. So, why did better living through chemistry come about? It wasn't scientific curiosity. There was one reason. It was very, very profitable. It wasn't profitable for us. So we could say the same about current industrial agricultural practices. Those are money-making machines, not farms. Depots, which are contained animal feeding operations, produce far more meat, milk, eggs than the same landmass could ever produce with traditional methods. And what is the result? You can forget the labor, forget the cruelty to animals, forget all those other things that in fact this third Reconstruction is all about. It's poisoning. And how is that? Up in the north, Lake Erie has now in such incredible algal bloom that all the humans that depend on Lake Erie for the water, not to mention all the other living creatures, are poisoned by these mycotoxins. And of course, global warming is exacerbating the danger by causing the water to be hotter. But what else is happening? It's the CACO. So when phosphorus from animal waste is released into water, that is a fertilizer, right? So it causes the algae to bloom. And when these blooms are big enough, they put out all these toxic chemicals and actually also make dead zones in the lake. So people can't swim, and you find dead fish, and in Toledo, they've actually closed off some water inlets for drinking water because of these toxins. They can't be removed by standard filtration methods. So if you want to recreate on Lake Erie, you actually can go check the daily HAB, or harmful algal bloom forecast. We know that state and federal EPAs regulate the disposal of human waste. In Cincinnati, obviously, the Sierra Club had a tremendous win to get the consent decree to prevent so much human waste going into the Ohio River. While there appears to be tighter regulation of sewage and chemical releases, how is it that Lake Erie is becoming more polluted? Even though there is a permitting process for these CAFOs release, they have huge sewage lagoons. They have all these other things, and that leaks into the Maumee watershed, 5,200 square miles that drain into the lake. So just since 2005, in 2005, there were 545 CAFOs in the Maumee River drainage. Now there are 775. The number of animals in those CAFOs has gone from 9 million to 20.4 million. Imagine the amount of sewage that represents. The EPA itself said that the satellite images demonstrate that the largest contributor of phosphorus to Lake Erie is from these CAFOs. 30% of all the phosphorus. And right here, the Ohio River is obviously vital to the whole health of our whole region, right? It's where most of our drinking water is coming from. But we probably we're all involved with grassroots organizations that right now that are fighting the transport of hazardous waste, namely radioactive fracking waste in barges. Where I live, which is in the eco-village, I can hear a particular siren that goes off when there are barge problems. So they occur. How many communities downstream depend on the Ohio River for safe drinking water? Not to mention all the other biota which have a right to thrive. So all these issues are linked. Our children are not getting the health care that they need. Linking back to Charles Darwin, he never recovered from the death of his favorite daughter at a young age because of issues which probably could today be solved with antibiotics. But all of us are facing that because of the people whose children are now permanently affected by lead in their water. Those are mostly poor people of color. And the immigrants I work with, many of them are fleeing to the United States, and specifically many to Cincinnati. I made 5 airport runs in 3 weeks, and I know a hell of a lot of other people who've come across the river without any kind of documentation. They are fleeing global warming, among all the other issues. And it's global warming from our pollution, not from Guatemala, not Honduras, not from El Salvador. So for the sake of all of us, and some of you are actually young enough to be around when things, maybe the shit really hits the fan, we need to have this third reconstruction. Amen.
Traditionally, this is how you would introduce yourself back home, because that's how people would know who you are by your parents. I'm going to be 32 next week. And I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I lost my grandma back in 2019 in January. She raised me since I was 2 days old. And she fought hard for us, for me and my brothers growing up. And I feel like I've been working my ass off ever since I got to the age of 16 to now. I've been homeless. I raised my kids by myself. I've done everything I could to keep my job, even when there was times I wouldn't know if I'd be able to pay the bills because I had to take care of my sick children, or there were situations, it was a struggle after struggle after struggle. I lost so many cars. I was lucky to have people that were able to help me through a lot of the hardship, but there's a lot of people who don't have that. There's a lot of single mothers, there's a lot of Native women who are being hurt and murdered. I just recently had my kids taken away because I didn't have any help while I was recovering from surgery. And so they want to put it as a substance abuse. I was just recovering from surgery. I wasn't even on anything but steroids. I was in a lot of pain. This is what the country provides for our people. Instead of actual help, they want to tear families apart. These 2 children that I fought so hard for, to give them a home, to get a good job, to make sure we had a reliable car, and they snatched them from my home. A lot of single mothers go through this bullshit because this is what our country stands for. They don't care about keeping their families together. They care about putting children in the system. They care about getting their money and their funding for everything. That's all they care about. I had someone tell me, America has the best water. And I said that was the stupidest thing I heard come out of your mouth. We put people in places in this country that is not a good resource to live on. We're constantly taking and taking and taking from the poor and giving to the rich. As soon as I get a chance to step up, something knocks me back down. It feels like ever since my grandma passed away for 2.5 years, it's been bullshit after bullshit. I'm tired. I shouldn't have to work this hard. I should not have to fight this hard. I have so much anxiety that my doctor put me on medication that made me suicidal. And I just want to give my kids a good life, just like anybody else does. We should have a support system. Someone should have been there. Their own father should have been there to help take care of these kids. Somebody should have helped me. I would have done it for anybody. And now I have to fight the system to get them back. I'm tired. And there's so many people like me that are tired. We need to make things right. We need to make things easier for families so that we could just live. We're the greatest country in the world, then why do we have so many people struggling so hard? We're not great. Maybe one day we can be, but not right now. There's too much people that are hurt and broken. And until we make something right for people and start making it to where they can actually get healthier mentally, physically, we're gonna stay broken. There shouldn't be these types of situations. People should be able to drink their water without being scared. People should be able to have resources and make sure that they have food, a home, have access to mental health. Be able to go to the doctor when they need to, instead of last minute and it's almost the time for their death because they couldn't. Everyone should have these types of access, and we don't. That's not a great country at all to me. We have to fight for these people. We have to. And we have to bring the families back together because that's where it starts. That's where the healing starts. It's through your families and your community.
Somebody's hurting our sister, and it's gone on
Far too long.
and we won't be
Silent anymore.
Thank you. Hello, my name's Mary Lehman, and I'm an ordained Lutheran pastor for 25 years. I currently serve in the Episcopal Diocese of Southern Ohio. Back at the beginning of, right at in the fall, as the election was closing down, a reporter came to my town and interviewed me and asked me about my political views going into the election. And I told her that as a Lutheran pastor, the way I live my life, make everyday choices, including how I vote, the policies I support or protest, the way I spend my money, the way I support and protest how my tax dollars are spent, all flow from my deepest values, which is shaped by my spiritual tradition. My political life, I told her, reflects my sacred life. I believe that we are all called to use our power to care for the most vulnerable, to respect and care for creation, to trust that love is the greatest force for change and transformation, to know that violence is rooted in fear and therefore the enemy of love, to realize that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and as we grow in our capacity to love, we recognize how deeply connected we are to each other and all creation. These values are shaped by the wisdom of the Jesus tradition. Jesus, who was born in the poorest community where he lived as an illegitimate outcast, in order to reveal that there is nowhere that God's love does not go. Jesus, who fled violence in his home country and became a refugee with his family in pursuit of safety and survival. Jesus, who was later lived as a homeless person, telling his disciples he had nowhere to lay his head. Jesus, who admonished his followers not to return violence with violence. Jesus, who made a point of eating with outcasts, the poor, and sinners. Jesus, who had no patience and respect for institutions or leaders who use their power and position to exploit the poor and serve themselves. Jesus, who said love could be found among the hungry, the incarcerated, the naked, the poor, and the thirsty. This is the wisdom of Jesus that shapes my civic engagement. And the beautiful thing about this wisdom is that it is universal. It is not just the wisdom of Jesus. This wisdom lives in the Judaic tradition. It is the wisdom of indigenous peoples around the world. It can be found in the Muslim tradition and the teachings of Buddha. The United States of America was founded on the spiritual principles of justice, peace, care for the vulnerable, respect for liberty, one nation under God. And we have lost our way. Instead, we find ourselves alienated from our deepest values due to the injustice of poverty, systemic racism, the denial of health care and ecological devastation, the overinvestment in systems of violence, and the lack of compassion for the universal struggles of the human family witnessed by the story that we just heard from our sister from Alaska. I am here to add my voice to the movement of the Poor People's Campaign in support of their work to help us as a nation remember who we really are. This work of the Poor People's Campaign is going forward to address things like the wealth inequities in our country, the militarization of our nation, climate and ecological devastation, clean and available water,
health care for everybody, a guarantee of jobs and living wages, affordable housing, equitable access to education, policing and mass incarceration, native and indigenous rights, immigrant rights, and voting rights. These are the things that are universally important to every person in our country, regardless of political affiliation. By calling on our elected officials to create laws and legislation rooted on our deepest national values, I am glad to be a part of the Poor People's Campaign and this movement for a third Reconstruction. Thank you.
All right, now we're going to read a little bit about the third Reconstruction resolution. Judge? Cool.
We need a third Reconstruction to revive our political commitment to moral laws and policies that can heal and transform the nation. Whereas household debt burdens have grown to over $14.5 trillion of U.S. families, including 3/4 of Black, Latino families, are having difficulty meeting usual household expenses. Whereas billionaires have added more than $1.3 trillion to their collective wealth from March 2020 to February 2021. Whereas $1.9 trillion of government revenue was lost by lowering the corporate tax rate in 2017. We must now heal the nation by repealing the 2017 tax cuts that reduced the corporate tax rate and the top marginal tax rate, repealing tax breaks on fossil fuels, repealing tax breaks for pass-through income, instituting a financial transaction tax on Wall Street, cutting the military budget by at least 10%, establishing a national commission to study and develop proposals on reparations for African Americans, establishing a national commission to make recommendations for restorative processes and reparations for indigenous and other dispossessed people, and using deficit spending to address the interlocking injustices. When we lift from the bottom, everybody rises.
We need a third Reconstruction to revive our political commitment to moral laws and policies that can heal and transform this nation. Whereas there are over 140 million people who are poor, low wealth, or just one emergency away from economic ruin in the United States, including 52% of children, 39 million, 45% of women, 74 million, 60% of Black people, 24 million, 64% of Latino, 38 million, 40% of Asian Pacific Islander people, 8 million, and 59% of Native and Indigenous people, 2 million. And 33% of white people, 66 million white people are poor and low wealth. Whereas the injustice of poverty is deeply entwined in the injustices of systematic racism, the denial of health care, and the ecological devastation, militarism, and distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism. Whereas 250,000 people die every year, this is before the pandemic, from poverty and inequality alone. Whereas these widespread conditions cannot be explained by blaming individual behaviors, nor as they inherent to our economy or society, but rather they are created and sustained by unjust and immoral laws, policies, systems, and structures. And as we say in the Poor People's Campaign, regressive policies have a death measurement. We must now heal the nation by acknowledging that this country is founded on the moral commitment to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote for the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. And these times require moral policies as part of the third Reconstruction to build our economy from the bottom up.
Woo!
When you lift from the bottom,
Everybody rises.
when you lift from the bottom,
Everybody rises.
forward together.
Not one step back.
All right, and now we'll close with a song.
All right.
Maybe we can come in a little bit closer. It'll sound louder. We're saying, because it echoes, maybe we can. There's a couple more people over on this that'll make it a little louder.
I think that was easier if you and Phil for more people.
Okay.
All right, so this song, a lot of you shall know, it's we are a new unsettling force. And so, with the lyrics of this song, may we ground the fact that we know that we are powerful, that we are here, and that also to acknowledge, especially in our communities, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, standing up for those that are most impacted, and be a new unsettling force where we need to stand up for the systems that are no longer working for the people. So, we are a new unsettling force, and we are powerful, a new unsettling force, and we're here. A new unsettling force for liberation, and we've got nothing to lose but our chains. A new unsettling force, and we are powerful, a new unsettling force, and we're here. A new unsettling force for liberation, and we've got nothing to lose but our chains are a new unsettling force, and we are powerful, a new unsettling force, and we're here. A new unsettling force for liberation, and we've got nothing to lose but our chains. A new unsettling force, and we are powerful. A new unsettling force, and we are here. A new